Well, welcome everybody to my inner room. It's great to have you here, and it's always a joy to come into your inner room. We're doing a bonus for you with the Inner Room School of Spirituality with a new friend of mine, and I've been reading him and watching him on YouTube for the last year or more. His name is Father John Behr. Welcome, Father John. Joy to have you. Really. First of all, Father John, tell us a little bit about who you are, what church you're from, what affiliation in that church, and then tell us about your story a little bit.
So I'm sure as soon as I open my mouth, everybody would know I'm from England.
No.
Yeah, they might just get it.
I thought you were from Alabama.
They might just get it.
Isn't it Alabama?
Alabama, England, maybe, but definitely from England. I've been in New York for some 25 years. I've been teaching in New York, St. Vladimir Seminary.
Right.
For some reason, I've been able to keep my accent, which really serves me well, because whatever I say, it sounds intelligent. Either that, or the new generation of students who've been brought up on Disney films, hear the English accent and think I'm the villain. One way or the other.
All I know is that Americans and our, the accents in the United States used to be really varied. Yeah. But as we travel more and more, we're getting into this homogenized, it's a homogenized American English. Yeah. And we are absolutely thrilled when we hear somebody talk with we love Irish, we love English, and the different kinds of English. And I have a friend, Matthew Kelly, who's a Catholic motivational speaker, and he's from Australia. And the fact that he's an Aussie, everybody just goes, "Oh, talk, we love to listen to you." I get up and I talk, and everybody goes, "Oh yeah, that he's from Oklahoma." Yeah.
So although I came from England and been here for 25 years, and I was born in England, my family background is actually Slavic, Russian on my father's side, and Swiss German on my mother's side.
Wow.
So my father was an Orthodox priest in the Russian Orthodox Church. His grandfather, so my great-grandfather, was a Russian Orthodox priest, and he was sent to England in 1926.
Wow.
Soon after the revolution.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's the world I grew up in. On my mother's side, her father was a Lutheran minister. She came from Swiss Germany, and in fact her parents met as students of Talbot in Basel.
Really?
Yeah, so students of Talbot, they're doing doctoral work under him.
Yeah.
And he ended up being a Lutheran minister, so ecclesial and academic on both sides.
Yeah, yeah.
And then, as it turns out, my brother is a monk on Mount Athos. He's been there for some 25 years, my younger brother even, and he's also ordained a priest, and my sister's married to a priest.
Goodness gracious.
And my boys are asking, is it going to happen to me as well? So academic and ecclesial on both sides.
Are they frightened?
No. But they've seen the life of the church.
Yeah.
They've seen that.
Yeah. Before I became a Catholic, I tell people I lived in a Franciscan friary. So I saw the underbelly of the church before I actually decided to get on board. And that was very good for me. Yeah. To know that the church is, it's human. Yeah. There's a humanity to the church. You know, in our church, or in our friary, we had an alcoholic. Yeah. We had a guy that was just socially unformed.
We're all broken, and we're all in need of healing.
Yeah, and we had. I wanted to do. Remember the sitcoms All in the Family? Yeah. I wanted to do a TV show called All in the Friary, because the stuff that went on, and I can't talk about it all on camera here because it would scandalize some of you, but it was hilarious. I mean, just stuff that was hilarious and human, and yet in that human environment.
Well, that's where our salvation's being worked out.
Bishops,
really,
provincials, found their vocation there. I found my vocation there. I don't know whether they want to claim that or not. Yeah, so they get so you saw the inside.
So I grew up with all of that. I suppose, talking about my own background and the influences in my life, well, apart from my parents, obviously, my father, and especially my mother in various ways, I think the first real major influence in my life, religiously speaking, was Metropolitan Anthony Bloom. So he and my grandmother actually grew up together as kids in Paris. They both emigrate children in Paris together in that world. Wow. He was slightly older than her. He used to teach her math. they had a very interesting relationship.
Yeah.
And so he was always like would it be a great uncle or a great great uncle or whatever it be. He was always like that with us.
Yeah.
So he baptized us. First went to confession with him. I learned to go to confession with him.
With him?
Yeah, and I learned to serve with him.
Did you really?
Yeah. So my parents were more than happy. We lived in Bristol. My parents were more than happy to send us off to my grandmother in London. Every holiday they could get, send us off to my grandmother. And so we'd go to church in London with Metropolitan Anthony Bloom.
Now was he tough or was he very loving?
Oh, very loving.
Was he?
Absolutely.
So if you made a mistake?
It wasn't like that at all. I mean, the dynamic of the relationship, it was like a great uncle, great grandfather, talking to a young child, bringing them up. Yeah. And I really do think that the first real ecclesial, liturgical formation was with him. It's interesting, I mentioned my brother is a monk of Mount Athos.
Yes.
A friend of mine went there a few years ago and visited his monastery and saw him serve. And he came back and said, you and your brother serve in exactly the same way.
Wow.
By that he didn't mean on Mount Athos they're doing things in more Greek style and
right.
more style, but just a way of being in the church, standing, posture, demeanour, all that
Same
kind of thing. Yeah. So we must have both imbibed it from Metropolitan Anthony.
So he got it from
my father as well.
So he got it from Metropolitan Anthony as well?
Yeah. Oh, well, we were kids together in the altar.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was my first really deep influence.
Now you shared with me that especially the Russian church, everybody knows everybody.
Yeah, if they're not related to each other.
Yeah.
It's a small emigre community.
Right.
I mean, it was large, but it's still an emigre community just coming out after the revolution in the 20s. My family moved, my great-grandfather moved to England in 1926. My grandmother, so the two sides of it, she moved, I think, in the 40s, that kind of time. Yeah.
There's something.
So she knew Bulgakov, she knew all of those figures.
There's something wonderful about that, Benedict XVI, when he was Joseph Ratzinger, he did a radio interview, 1969, and he says, some people consider it a prophecy, that the church will get on the outs with the culture in which it lives, that we will lose our voice, we will lose our property, and the church will get small. And he says, when we get small, we will rediscover what it is to be Catholic again. Right. And we're so big.
So when we come to it, when we start talking about the work I do, although I spent the last 25 years in New York, I've spent the last 30 years in the 2nd century. That is my home, and that's kind of the ecclesial, theological world I live in, and so I'm at home with this idea of being a minority church.
Right.
In this case, it's before Constantine rather than after Constantine.
Correct. Right.
But in a sense, the generations of my family for the last couple of generations have been living in that in this case, Russian imperial world, in a Christian world in the West, but out of their own homeland in that. Well, so in my early childhood, Metropolitan Anthony, then I think I mentioned my parents. My parents brought us up with incredible freedom. Absolutely incredible freedom. They always took the line that the only thing they ever expected from school was that we learned to do reading, writing and basic arithmetic. If we got anything more than that, they were happy, but that was all. and if I wanted to go off on a cycling trip, fine, I'd go off on a cycling trip.
Right.
Yeah.
Which
I did. Which I did.
Yeah.
So I'd miss class and go off on a cycling trip, and that was fine. But that also extended to church. Yeah, so they took the line that as soon as we were old enough to stay at home without a babysitter of some kind, we can make our own mind up. So guess what? We all stopped going to church. I mean, newsflash, that might happen. But had we not had that freedom, and then not only the freedom to do that, and then having grown up in the church, you really need to kind of go out and come back. It's really interesting. There's a book by Philip Rousseau on Basil the Great. And he points out that Basil and his siblings were the first generation of people who were brought up in the church, and they had to go to Athens to come back. To go and study in Athens, philosophy and rhetoric and whatever they're doing in Athens, and then come back, and then they rediscovered Christianity or flourished in it for themselves, rather than simply carrying on the family lineage.
I'm reminded of the Amish here in the United States.
Right.
And it's a tradition that they actually go out and sow some wild oats.
Right.
But did you know 80% of them come back?
Yeah. Whereas if you try and keep them in,
right,
it's kind of a perpetuation rather than a discovery for yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So we took advantage of that as 12, 13-year-olds.
Yeah.
And not only that, but I decided I'm going to be an absolute Marxist. And my father, and this is where, such admiration, my father said, okay, let's read through Marx together.
Right.
And he got his copy of Marx. He'd done philosophy as an undergraduate, so he got his copy of Marx and we read through Marx together. Yeah, without any kind of pressure on any side or anything, but just exploring all of that. Yeah. So not only the freedom to go out, but supporting me in doing that. Yeah. And, had it been constant criticism or whatever else might be, I probably would never have come back. Yeah. So going out, doing all that kind of thing. And I got into all sorts of other stuff. I'm not sure it's too edifying to talk about but I became a prodigal for many years. Yeah. And at the age of 17, literally it's a week after my 17th birthday, I woke up one morning and I said, enough of all of this. I'm off to a monastery.
Right.
Yeah, I'm off to a monastery. I came in, I told my parents, and they said, okay. Yeah. And they let me drop out of school.
Wow.
Literally drop out of school. I was 17 years old.
High school?
Well, in England, remember, you do O-levels. If you know Harry Potter, it'd be the ordinary wizarding levels at the age of 16, and then A-levels, advanced at the age of 18.
Right.
So I'd done my O-levels. I was such a pain in my teenage years. Really. I was so bored in school that my teachers let me sit at the back of the class and teach myself. So I started teaching myself. Started teaching myself logic. Yeah. And so I'd entered myself for O-level in logic. I found I could teach myself. I passed, and that was fine. Right. So when I dropped out of school, I decided to teach myself. So I taught myself 17, 18-year-old A-level stuff, material.
That's what I did.
Yeah.
I was bored to death in school.
Yeah.
Just bored to death.
But again, the teachers let me have the freedom to sit at the back and do my own thing. Yeah. But anyway, I got into all sorts of other stuff during the 16, 17-year-old, whatever it was. Don't need to talk about it. But I woke up that morning absolutely convinced I'm off to a monastery. I hadn't been to church for 5 years, whatever it was. It wasn't to become a monk. Mm-hmm. It was simply, I need to take this step now. And I must have had a memory, I know the memory now, but it must have came to me, of having gone to Father Sophroni's monastery in Essex. My father would take me there when I was 4 or 5 years old. I had a vague memory of that, and I knew that's where I wanted to go. Wow. And so my parents let me drop out of school, and I went off to a monastery, Father Sophroni's monastery, now Saint Sophrony, canonized just a few weeks ago.
Yes.
For 5 months. Yeah, all the way through from that late fall period into Pascha, Easter. Yeah. So there I was, 17 years old, not having been to church for 5 years, never having thought about anything religious, never having thought about read theological books or, been on a quest or anything like that. And I wake up in a monastery, and because they got all sorts of different monks and nuns, just like here, together, living together. Their basic form of prayer, Orthodox liturgical prayer is got lots of books and lots of material and all the rest of it. Right. But because you've got all these different monks and nuns from internationally, they needed something they could concentrate on together. And so what they did, following Archimandrite Saint Sophrony, was to do 2 hours of the Jesus prayer communally in the morning and then 2 hours in the evening.
Now, did they recite it?
What they did, they started with opening prayers, Heavenly King, Our Father, a bit of psalmody and so on. And then the eldest monk there would say 100 Jesus prayers aloud. Everybody else sitting down quietly. Yeah, praying. Glory to the Father, Alleluia 3 times, Glory to the Father, standing up for that. And then somebody else would pick it up for another 100. And they would go around, about 2 hours altogether. And then intercessions to the Theotokos, intercessions for the people that we're praying for, and so on and so on. And then back to the Jesus prayer to finish off with, and then the great doxology, glory to God in the highest, read to finish. So 2 hours said community. Not everybody saying it together. Only one person saying it, but everybody saying it together with them. As
and that's the earliest monastic tradition, is even with psalmody, that 1 or 2 monks would actually read. The rest of them would sit.
They were the Saltists.
Yeah, they would sit in a room, and they would weave baskets and ropes.
Well, they do. Yeah. So, never having been to church or thought about anything religious for 5 years or something, here I was sitting next to now Saint Sophronie for 2 hours morning and evening saying the Jesus prayer. That was quite an immersive experience, shall we say. And then during the day...
Well, wait, let's stop there. What was he like? What did you get from that? Being next to him, praying.
Let me answer it circularly. So during the day, I would spend the mornings, I don't know if it was morning, afternoon, but half the day I would spend doing my studies, and half the day doing whatever work they assigned me, usually working in the garden or something, clean, whatever it might be. Yeah?
Right.
During the whole time, I don't think I ever sought out one of the fathers there to have a talk. Yeah, it didn't even occur to me to think I need to sit down with somebody and have an edifying spiritual conversation or anything like that.
Yep.
I think only towards the end did my father, because we were getting to Lent and so on, my father recommended I read Schmemann's book, Great Lent.
Yeah.
And that's the first theological book I read, that just getting into that.
Yeah.
So it wasn't that I would sit down and have long conversations with him or anybody else. So it was just imbuing it all.
Yeah.
Yeah, literally just imbuing it all, just being part of it. And I remember about halfway through that, waking up one morning and saying, yeah, this is it. It makes sense.
Some of my most powerful experiences in my formation was being with older men as they prayed.
Yes.
And getting their spirit.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and
exactly that. So, I mean, I don't even have words to describe it.
No.
So I don't know how to answer your question, apart from apathetically, by saying, I was doing work and whatever, but it was just living with them, and then liturgical worship, and then going through the whole Lenten cycle, through Pascha and everything, and that was it.
And for you all in the school here, this is why visiting a monastery
so important.
is really important, and to go to be... Not to criticize, just to go and be with people who are living the life. We invite you to come to Little Portion anytime. We take care of guests, so come be with us for a while. You don't even have to join the monastery.
and literally just to be, not to go and ask questions or to try and find out answers, but just to live that life for as long as you're able to do it.
Yes,
it's transforming.
Beautiful.
Transforming. So that takes me up to about 17, 18, did my A-levels. I thought about, I started talking to Metropolitan Anthony about going to seminary in Russia, but that didn't work out probably just as well before the fall of the wall and all that kind of thing.
Right.
And I knew that I wanted to study theology, but I also knew that I didn't want to do it in a typical undergraduate program. Especially being Orthodox, I want to study Orthodox theology. Most undergraduate programs, you do a little bit on Scripture, a little bit in the early church, then heavy Reformation onwards.
Right.
That really wasn't going to appeal to me.
No.
By that time, I'd also started reading John Zizoulas, Being as Communion. And in that book, that had just come out in English, and it was making waves. And he was talking about Emmanuel Levinas, the French Jewish philosopher.
Wow.
So I decided I'd go and do philosophy at university. So I went to London, lived with my grandmother, lived in a hut in the garden with my grandmother. And I did...
You had a hut in the garden?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Oh, beautiful.
My father lived in a hut in the garden, in the same house when he was a young man.
Wow.
So, yeah.
So you had your own little hermitage.
There's a saint in the Byzantine tradition called John the Hut Dweller.
Yeah.
Totally sympathise, empathise.
Yeah.
So I have a little hermitage, I do it all, and, I keep my own rule of prayer. I go to the monastery at the weekend, it's half an hour, whatever, by motorbike in those days.
Yeah.
Did my first degree in philosophy, with a view to going on to study theology. So it's kind of preparatory. And then I ended up going to Oxford to study with Metropolitan Kallistos. Yeah.
You've rubbed shoulders with some good teachers.
Yeah.
Holy men.
And I really think that actually it's dawning on me more and more over the last couple of years that one of the greatest advantages in my life is that I've never studied theology formally. Yes. I haven't gone through and done, X number of hours in systematics, X number of hours in Old Testament exegesis, all the kind of things you would typically do in doing theology. What I did was I learned how to read and think by doing philosophy. Then I went to Oxford and I read the Fathers with Kallistos.
So you went right to Patristics.
Yeah, and because I went from philosophy to theology, I couldn't go straight into the doctoral program like my wife did. You know, you do your bachelor's and you go straight into the doctoral program in England at that time. Anyway.
Really?
Mm-hmm. So I had to do 2 years of a master's program, and those 2 years then counted as part of the 3 years for doctoral program. But those 2 years of master's program basically just meant meeting with Metropolitan Kallistos once a week, and we worked through the Fathers one by one. You know, and he'd tell me, okay, next week, go away and read Origen, or Irenaeus, chronologically, Irenaeus, Origen, Athanasius, and so on. Go away, read him, write something on it, and come back to me next week.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it was very personal.
Very personal.
See, a lot of the guys that go
to read.
Some of the guys that go to the seminary in the Roman tradition, they go there and they almost have nervous breakdowns because it's such a scholastic. You know, hotbed,
right?
And
right.
They get
it's
out.
It's a world in itself like that.
Yeah, and they learn how to just pass the courses.
Yeah.
Where this kind of learning is more Platonic, isn't it?
It's much more Socratic.
Yeah. Socratic. Sorry, Socratic. Sorry.
And you're reading through the text together, and you're following the tradition, and you're watching the tradition develop and unfold. Yeah. And he was also, you know, the bishop in Oxford, serving liturgy on a Sunday morning, and all of that. Yeah. He catechized my wife, and then he married us in '91.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So looking back at my formative years and all of that, it was you know, family, very much so. But then Metropolitan Anthony, St. Sophrony, Metropolitan Kallistos, and then I'd actually add to that when in '93, '94 they invited me to come and teach at St. Vladimir's. Father Thomas Hopko was the dean.
Wow.
You know. And it was really from him. My first book was actually dedicated to him.
Really?
Because it's from him that I really got the passion for the scriptures read in light of Christ.
Wow. Oh, and that's your thing.
Oh, that's my thing.
Well, this is kind of a good place to break. We're at about 20 minutes, I think. I guess the thing I get from Father John is that you have to immerse yourself in the community of faith. And it's hard to do when you're on your own. You have to make the sacrifice, if you will, going somewhere, immersing yourself. And the faith is not only taught, it has to be caught. You have to catch it. And there's so much a part of you. And we just sat under Father John for a week of teaching here at the monastery. And I got to tell you, it exudes out of the pores of his skin. Because it's not just here, it's not just here, it's everywhere. It's the whole life. So thank you, Father John. We're going to come back next week and do another 20 minutes, and we'll pick it up from there. Thank you for letting us come into your inner room from this, my hermitage, my inner room. Thank you for letting us into your inner room and into your heart. And don't forget, no matter what problem you face, all things are possible with God.